In my Minecraft mob ranking, I said that my personal favorite mob in Minecraft is the villager. They're one of the most helpful mobs in the game due to several different properties, the most obvious of which being their ability to trade. These trades can give the player significantly easier access to the game's many items. If you've ever been in desperate need of a clock, they got you covered. These trades all revolve around emeralds, whether it be you giving the villagers emeralds for items or the villagers giving emeralds for items. While many of these trades are incredibly useful, there's a large amount of pretty bad or mediocre ones. What are you talking about? 5 emeralds for a leather cap is a steal. The trades each villager get are determined by their profession, which you can control by giving them a different workstation. When taking all of their trades into account though, it's pretty clear that some villagers are better than others. So today, I thought it'd be fun to rank every villager type in Minecraft from the worst to the best. Now how exactly am I going to be ranking these? Well, that's actually pretty simple. I'll take a look at all of their trades to see which type is the most useful ones for a vanilla Java survival world. I'll consider both what the villager gives you and what the villagers will take for emeralds. This is actually surprisingly complex to judge, which you'll see as the list goes on. There are also a few other things villagers can do which can also play a part in the ranking. I was going to consider villager gifts, but they did not change my opinion at all. Wait, the weaponsmith can give gold axes now? This changes everything! Last thing I want to mention, I will also be including the wandering trader. Yes, he's not technically a villager, but if I didn't include him, I'd get a million comments about it. With that being said, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. At 200k, I'm ranking every 2D Mario level, and let's jump right into the list. We're going to be separating this video off into tiers, since I feel like the ones within the tiers are incredibly close. They will of course still be ordered. With that being said, F tier is just one person, it's the Nitwit. This was the easiest last place I have ever had to make for a list like this. Want to know what this guy trades? Nothing. I'm not going to include unemployed villagers on this list because that's stupid, but the difference for the Nitwits is that they can't be employed. No matter how many workstations you place or family members you threaten, they will refuse to get a job. So yeah, that pretty much makes them a complete waste of space.
Or are they?
While they are still absolutely in last place for me, they do actually have a few uses which can possibly put them above one other member on this list. First off, the Nitwit may not be able to work, but he can breed to get villagers that can work. So if you get stuck in a world with just 2 Nitwits somehow, you can still get access to the more helpful villagers. On top of that, Nitwits can also be used as a part of iron farms. Iron farms are one of the most important farms in Minecraft. It's one of the major reasons villagers are my favorite mob. The way it works is by putting 3 villagers in danger by having them see a zombie, causing them to spawn in an iron golem. However, with no other valid spawning spaces, the iron golem then gets spawned in water and then gets pushed into lava. You can do this with all of the other main villager types, but if you've got a limited supply to work with, might as well force the Nitwits to get jump scared forever. But yeah, these are all things you'd expect a villager to be capable of doing, so the Nitwit still absolutely deserves last place. 14, the leather worker. Alright, now we've got our first actual villager to kick off our C tier. To get a leather worker, you need to place down a cauldron. Now I'm not counting the workstation cost toward the list, but for basically being the most expensive workstation, this guy is not worth it. The best way I think we should cover these guys is to first start with the items they'll take from the player, and then look at the items they can give the player. The leather worker has 4 trades that can give the player emeralds. At a novice, they'll take 6 leather, at an apprentice, they'll take 26 flint, at journeyman, they'll take 9 rabbit hide, and at expert, they'll take 4 scute. In order to analyze how good these trades are, we need to consider every source of these items in the game. Most of the time, this will come down to which item has the most efficient or practical farm, which is the main reason this video is so hard to judge. Depending on what types of farms you like to build, this could drastically change your ranking, so I'm just doing my best based on my own personal experience. Anyway, looking back at these items I mentioned, I feel like we could just eliminate the scute. It's one of the most annoying items to get, and I hate dealing with turtles. I mean, I play Mario games, what did you expect? The other 3 aren't bad, but definitely not great by any means. Flint isn't really something you farm, but you can sometimes get a large amount of it early game. Late game, I usually have soak touch on my shovel for the express purpose of not getting flint though. I don't think in my many years of playing I've ever seen someone build a rabbit farm, so the rabbit hide trade also isn't the best. That leaves the leather trade, which I think is solid enough. Cow farms aren't too uncommon, and you can get them from piglin bartering as well, and having a big bartering farm is a pretty good thing to have. So yeah, not the best ways to get emeralds here, but what about the other trade? The only items the leather worker will give the player are leather armor, leather horse armor, and a saddle. The saddle is pretty much the only one you could maybe say is worth it, but even then, getting it from fishing or a chest is not that hard. The prices are absurd here too. 7 emeralds for a leather chestplate is crazy. That's almost double the price the armorer offers for a chain chestplate. So for having very weak trades in both departments, I think the leather worker deserves to be here. 13, the butcher. It was pretty difficult determining which of these 2 were worse, but I thought the butcher was slightly better. Let's start with what you can give it for emeralds. You can give it 14 raw chicken, 7 raw pork chop, or 6 raw rabbit at novice, 16 coal at apprentice, 7 raw mutton or 10 raw beef at journeyman, 10 dried kelp blocks for expert, and 10 sweet berries at master. There is a lot more variety here, and for the raw meats, I could easily see someone having an animal farm for somewhat easy access to any of the trades. The other 3 though I think are getting a bit more solid. Coal you can easily get from mining and a wither skeleton farm. Now this is the worst of the 3, which I will explain a bit later, but it's an acceptable trade if this is the only villager you have access to. The other 2 trades are surprisingly pretty solid. solid. 10 dried kelp blocks may seem a bit complicated at first, but with the introduction of the crafter next update, you can easily make a farm that automatically and self-sufficiently smelts kelp and puts it into block form. There's a great video by Mumbo Jumbo that I highly recommend if you want to look more into this. After this video though, you better not leave. Sweet berries are also surprisingly solid too. I actually didn't realize you can make farms for them completely automatically using foxes. Unlike dried kelp blocks and coal that can smelt things, sweet berries aren't really useful in any other way, so if you set up a farm, you could get some pretty easy emeralds. So I'd say overall slightly better trades for emeralds, but what can the butcher actually give you? Not much. He can give you rabbit stew, 5 cooked pork chop, and 8 cooked chicken. Yeah, you can farm those really easily, except rabbit stew, but like, why would you want rabbit stew? So yeah, this guy is a bit better than the leather worker, but not by much. 12. The Wandering Trader. This guy was incredibly hard to place, which makes sense because he's not technically a villager. I knew he'd be near the bottom, but I didn't know how low exactly. As of 1.20, he has the most amount of unique items any villager can give the player. I'm not going to go over everything, but there is some decent stuff here, most notably the saplings and the nautilus shells. The nautilus shell trade can save some time while trying to make a conduit, and the sapling trade can be a lifesaver if you can't find a specific biome. That being said though, once you have all the saplings you need, this guy kinda becomes useless. Well, you could always murder him. This guy always spawns in with 2 llamas attached to him with a lead, meaning you can basically get 2 free leads and some leather every time you see him, which can be pretty nice. On the other hand though, and this is what made him so hard to place, he can't do the things that Nitwit can. You can't breed him to get more villagers, nor can he be used in iron farms, so depending on how you look at things, I could totally understand this guy being the worst villager in the game. On top of that, they'll automatically despawn after 40 minutes, even if you give it a name tag. You can push it in the nether to save it for a bit longer, but that's not really worth it most of the time, especially since it can never refresh its trades. Despite all of that, I still decided to put it up here for the few times it saved me with the sapling trade. I can't say I've ever been saved by our previous 3 entries, so that has to at least be worth something. 11. The Mason. I originally had this guy up a bit higher, but I think that was just because I was biased for my pal Oswald in my Skyblock world. Anyway, this guy's trades are kinda mid. To get emeralds, the player can give them 10 clay balls at novice, 20 stone at apprentice, 16 granite, andesite or diorite at journeyman, and 12 quartz at expert. The thing about the Mason is that yeah, clay balls and stone are very easy to obtain, but they're not really something you farm. If you're mining out a big area and don't plan on using the granite you got for anything, then sure, this is a decent way to get some extra emeralds. The Mason though, isn't really one you rely on, at least in my experience. You can get some emeralds from it for sure, but really only if you're taking on a project that requires mining. You could farm quartz from piglin barters I guess, but I feel like quartz is way too helpful for other things to waste it on emeralds. Another thing holding the Mason back is what it can give the player. It can give them bricks, chiseled stone bricks, polished andesite, diorite, and granite, dripstone blocks, all colored terracotta, all glazed terracotta, quartz blocks, and quartz pillars. I feel like most of this stuff is pretty easy to get on your own. I mentioned Skyblock before, but that's really the only time I could see him being useful. Though now I have to rant. Why doesn't this guy trade us deep slate? It is my favorite family of blocks and it makes perfect sense. Trying to build in Skyblock without deep slate was torture. So yeah, the Mason can be helpful, but only under some very specific circumstances. 10. The Shepherd. This is our last guy in C tier, and it's a slight improvement over what we've seen so far. Starting off, this guy will take 18 white, brown, black, or gray wool at novice, since those are the 4 naturally spawning sheep colors, excluding the pink sheep, but who cares. He'll take 12 black, gray, lime, light blue, or white dye at apprentice, 12 red, light gray, pink, yellow, or orange dye at journeyman, and 12 green, brown, blue, purple, cyan, or magenta dye at expert. That's quite a bit to consider, so I'm gonna kinda group this stuff together. I'm only gonna look at the white wool since it's the easiest. You can set up a sheep farm or use string from a spider farm, but there are definitely much more efficient ways to get emeralds from some later villagers. As for the dye, this one is kinda complicated. The flower ones are good for early accessibility, but not so much for farming since they require bone meal, which could just be turned into white dye for the trade. I think the main dye trades you'll want to look at are black dye from squid farms, white dye from skeleton farms, green dye from cactus farms, and red dye from iron golem farms. Of these, I think red dye is the best since iron farms are a pretty essential farm type as I've said, and you'll pretty much always end up with more poppies than you could ever use. But that's also sort of the thing with the shepherd's trades. I feel like if you're setting up a dye farm, it's so that you can actually use the dye. Sure, maybe after a project you could turn it into an emerald source, but there are just much better ways to do it. As for what this guy can trade to you, that includes shears, all wool types, all carpet types, all bed types, all banner types, and a painting. The colors will be chosen at random though, so it's much more effort to get a villager with the exact wool type you need than to just get the wool yourself. So much like everything else in this tier, the trades aren't great, but the red dye trade is helpful enough for me to put it at the top. 9. The Fisherman. Onto our B tier. This is where it starts to get much more helpful, and these are the villagers I actually consider getting. We can see this guy's an improvement pretty much right away with the items it takes for emeralds. These include 20 string or 10 coal at novice, 15 raw cod at apprentice, 13 raw salmon at journeyman, 6 tropical fish at expert, and pufferfish at master, along with oak, spruce, jungle, acacia, or dark oak boats.
I just can't do it. I can't.
Pretty much all of these are really solid ways to get emeralds. Starting off with the string, if you have a spider spawner you're using for XP, then turning the string drops you get into emeralds works out pretty well. This is also much more efficient than turning it into wool for a shepherd, since here it's only 20 string per emerald as opposed to 360 string. Speaking of efficiency, we saw the butcher have a coal trade earlier, but it's actually much better if done through the fisherman. Here you only need 10 coal as opposed to 16 coal per emerald. A few other villagers we see later also have coal trades, but none are as cheap as the fisherman. Those are the main two trades you'll be focusing on, but the others aren't bad either. Boats are pretty easy to make, seeing as it's just 1.25 logs, and if you get an AFK fishing farm, you could have plenty of fish to trade if you wait overnight. The only thing holding the fisherman back from going higher though would have to be what he can give you, since it's honestly not that great. The fisherman can give you cooked cod, a bucket of cod, cooked salmon, a campfire, and an enchanted fishing rod. Before you get too excited about that last one, it only enchants up to level 19. Yeah, none of those trades are really hard to get at all, but the trades I mentioned before are certainly worth the fisherman making it into B tier. 8. The Cartographer. This guy's really interesting, as I'd say he's our first real villager to have a trade giving the player an item that's actually pretty dang useful. Let's start with what we can give him for emeralds though. There are only 3 trades this time, being 24 paper at novice, 11 glass panes at apprentice, and a compass at journeyman. Right out of the gate, the compass trade is basically entirely useless due to another trade we'll see much later, so that leaves us with 2 more. 11 glass panes is definitely pretty doable. According to my calculations, that's about 4.125 sand blocks per emerald. That's pretty solid, but that doesn't consider the fact that you also have to smelt all this sand, and it can end up being kind of time consuming. So that leaves us with a paper trade, and yep, it's fantastic. Sugarcane farms are not only extremely easy to set up, but pretty efficient too. They don't require any player input, so it's very easy to keep a big one running for a quick source of emeralds. On top of that great trade for emeralds though, we also have what the Cartographer can actually give the player.
Before we continue this segment, I saw this while getting footage. How is the iron golem floating?
The empty map, item frame, and any banner trades are all pretty decent, but nothing that notable. The other 3 though are all incredibly interesting, those being the Ocean Explorer map, the Woodland Explorer map, and the Glow Banner pattern. Those first 2 act as maps that you can use to find an ocean monument and woodland mansion respectively. That is extremely helpful, especially in the case of the woodland mansion due to how rare they are. Honestly, the only reason that Cartographer isn't higher is because I really think it should have had more maps like this. An ancient city map, for example, would be greatly appreciated to help find the Silence Armor trim. I'm surprised they haven't added more maps yet, so hopefully they can do this in the future. Oh, and the glow pattern looks pretty cool. 7. The Fletcher. To end off our B tier, we have one of the most efficient ways to get emeralds. He's got 5 trades that can give the players emeralds, which include 32 sticks at novice, 26 flint at apprentice, 14 string at journeyman, 24 feathers at expert, and 8 tripwire hooks at master. We already saw the flint trade before, but the other 4 are pretty interesting. The string trade here is actually 6 string cheaper than the fisherman, making the Fletcher have the best string trade. Tripwire hooks are kind of expensive, but if you have an AFK fishing farm, you might be able to collect a few of these to turn into emeralds. An automatic chicken farm would work great for the feather trade, especially since I don't personally find feathers that useful otherwise. But the main trade I like to look at is the stick trade. This is one of the easiest ways to get emeralds, essentially only costing 4 logs per emerald. Now technically yes, we did see the fisherman have a cheaper trade with its boat earlier, but that's not the end of the story. One thing I haven't mentioned up until now is villager curing. By letting the villager get turned into a zombie like the monster that you are, you can then cure it to get a discount on the villager's trades. While the fisherman can't go any lower with the boat trade, the Fletcher can go much lower than 32 sticks. By stacking the bonus enough times, you can get it down to just 1 stick per emerald, which is pretty insane. Now yes, they are planning on patching the stacking of discounts later, but the discount is still very helpful here. Now while this guy does have some good trades to get emeralds, what he gives you is a bit weak. You can get arrows, flint, bows, crossbows, an enchanted bow, an enchanted crossbow, and 1 of 15 different types of tipped arrow. Yeah, none of that is really that exciting. In fact, I'd argue some of them are a complete scam. For the flint trade, you have to give it 10 gravel and an emerald for 10 flint in return. Literally just mine the gravel you collected. Still, this is definitely a pretty solid villager type that I highly recommend. 6. The Cleric. The A tier I think are near essentials, and we start off pretty strong with the Cleric. It's got a bit of a smaller pool of trades than some of the previous ones, but I'd say it specializes in quality over quantity. It's got 6 items it'll take in exchange for emeralds, 32 rotten flesh at novice, 3 gold at apprentice, 2 rabbit's foot at journeyman, 4 scooter 9 glass bottles at expert, and 22 nether wart at master. I'm just gonna go out and say the last 4 do not matter at all, unless you've been hoarding rabbit's feet like a psychopath. The only 2 that really matter here are the rotten flesh trade and the gold trade. Much like the spider spawner I mentioned before, you could very easily set up a zombie XP farm at a spawner, which is not only slightly more XP efficient, but also gives you plenty of rotten flesh to trade. While you do need more rotten flesh than in the string trades, I personally find this trade a bit better. That's simply because rotten flesh doesn't have a use outside of this. Sure, it can be used to bring dogs to full health, but that's literally it. Since zombies are pretty much the most common mob too, you're gonna have a ton of this whether you have a farm or not. Additionally, the gold trade is also pretty dang good. Gold farms have the potential to be some of the most efficient farms in the game, both for the gold drops and XP, so it's very worthwhile to build one. While gold certainly has a lot of uses outside of this trade, you can make golden nuggets. Getting an emerald off of 3 isn't a bad deal in the slightest. These are two of the best emerald trades we've seen, which are what puts the Cleric in A tier. The items the Cleric can give the player aren't half bad either though. They can give redstone dust, lapis, glowstone, ender pearls, and bottles of enchanting. This villager acts as a pretty easy renewable source of these resources, which can save you a bit of time hunting for them in the world. Very solid selection of items all around in my opinion. Alright, these next 3 are sort of a package deal, so I can cover them all at once I think. 5 the weaponsmith, 4 the toolsmith, and 3 the armorer. The trades among these 3 are easily the most similar between villager classes, specifically when looking at the trades we can use to get emeralds. Each of them have 4, with 3 being the exact same between them. The only one to change goes 1 lava bucket for the armorer, 30 flint for the toolsmith, and 24 flint for the weaponsmith. Wow, the weaponsmith really is just a better version. Those trades don't really matter though, as I'm much more interested in the other 3. First is 15 coal at novice, which is worse than the fisherman, so we can ignore that. Another is 1 diamond for an emerald, which is kinda weak honestly. When do these start getting good? Well, that comes from their final trades for an emerald being 4 iron ingots. This is fantastic for a large number of reasons. Not only is iron extremely easy to come by, but as I've mentioned several times by now, iron farms are an incredibly important, simple, and efficient farm. In my Minecraft worlds, this is my main way of getting emeralds since I usually have a ton of excess iron. That by itself would be enough for me to put them up in A tier, but what makes them go above the Cleric for me? Well, it would have to be the items that they can give the player, as these are also really solid. This is where the differences between these 3 become important, so let's go in order of how I rank them. The worst of the 3 is the weaponsmith, who can only give the player an iron axe, an enchanted iron sword, a bell, an enchanted diamond axe, and an enchanted diamond sword. Next up is the toolsmith, which can trade any stone tool, a bell, any enchanted iron tool, except the hoe, and any enchanted diamond tool, except the hoe is not enchanted. Finally, the armorer can give the player any piece of iron armor, a bell, any piece of chain armor, a shield, and any piece of enchanted diamond armor. So yeah, after looking at those trades, hopefully it becomes pretty apparent why they're good, as they give extremely easy access to any diamond piece of equipment you could want. This can pretty much completely save you from having to mine at all if you don't want to, and it almost entirely removes luck from the equation of finding diamonds. Plus, if you're a loser and somehow die with all your stuff, you can use these villagers to at least regain some of what you lost, even if it's not the max of netherite. Speaking of though, it's incredibly important to save diamonds now since you need 7 diamonds to duplicate the netherite template for every piece of equipment, so using the villagers to get the actual equipment while you save your diamonds could be optimal. These 3 villagers not only offer one of the best ways for a player to get emeralds, but also give the player an easy source of pretty good gear. But these last 2 types in S tier, they're in a league of their own. I could see the number 1 spot going either way between our 2 final contestants, but I think most sane people will agree that these 2 are the most helpful villagers in the game by far. Kicking off this tier, we have 2, the farmer. Starting us off, its trades are extremely good. To get emeralds from a farmer, you can give it either 20 wheat, 16 potatoes, 22 carrots, or 15 beetroots at novice, 6 pumpkins at apprentice, and 4 melons at journeyman. Not only are all of these pretty easy to get, especially in a village, but they're all automatically farmable. While I don't think they're quite as good as the iron trade from the last 3 guys, these are certainly some of the better trades for emeralds. As for what the farmer gives you, that includes bread, pumpkin pie, apples, cookies, cake, suspicious stew, which is literally useless, do not do that trade, golden carrots, and glistening melons. Honestly, not the best trades in the world, except for one. Golden carrots are actually the single best food source in the game, and this trade from farmer villagers is easily the fastest way to get more. This is pretty much the main trade I find myself doing once I have all my gear set in a world. I'll build an iron farm, turn that iron into emeralds, and then turn those emeralds into golden carrots for food. It makes playing the game so much easier since you don't have to worry as much about harvesting food. I think that alone would have given the farmer second on my list, but what separates him into S tier actually has nothing to do with his trades at all. Unlike the other villagers, the farmer actually has unique AI. This causes him both to harvest and replant crops whenever they're fully grown, which may just seem like a cute little feature to some, but this is an absolute game changer. Remember how I said wheat, potatoes, carrots, and beetroots are all automatically farmable? Well, that's only possible because of this guy. On top of that though, farmers are also the only reason automatic villager breeders can work. To breed villagers, you need to give them food, and since the farmer harvests food and shares it by himself, that creates an automatic breeder. So yeah, I think even if the farmer had no trades, he'd be good just because of this, but having this on top of very strong trades puts the farmer safely into S tier. But as for my number 1 pick, is anyone really going to be surprised by this? It's the Librarian. While they don't have any special AI like the farmer, they have easily the best trades in the game. First, let's start with the trades that can get you emeralds. You can give 24 paper at novice, 4 books at apprentice, 5 ink sacks at Journeyman, and 2 Book and Quills at Expert. I already mentioned how good the paper trade is, but the other 4 aren't bad if you have a leather, squid, and feather farm. Those aren't the best emerald trades in the world, but the paper trade is more than enough to make the Librarian pretty good. But what about the items the Librarian can give the player? This includes bookshelves, lanterns, glass, clocks, compasses, and name tags. Many of those items can be quite helpful, especially name tags, since this trade is the only reliable way to get more without needing good luck. But okay, everyone knows why this guy is good. He gives enchanted books. But not just any enchanted book. With the exception of Soul Speed and Swift Sneak, the Librarian can give the player every enchantment in the game. This completely eliminates the need to gamble with the enchantment table, and I know, keep gambling and all, but this is basically just better. It's especially helpful for the enchantments that go on multiple equipment like Unbreaking, Efficiency, and Protection. But the main thing that puts this guy at number 1 is the fact that it can trade the player Mending, the by far best enchantment in the game. Not only that, but Mending can't be gotten in the enchantment table, making villager trading the best way to get more Mending books for your gear. I like to have full armor, a full set of tools, an elytra, and an extra pickaxe, which comes out to me needing 11 Mending books. The enchantment book is easily the single most valuable villager trade, and is pretty much the main reason anyone sets up trading halls. Sure, it can be extremely annoying mining and breaking the lectern until you eventually get the enchantment you want, but it's a small price to pay for easily the best villager Minecraft has to offer. But anyways, that's it for this video. Are you all mad I didn't mention how amazing the orange tulip trade on the Wandering Trader is? Let me know in the comments. This was a surprisingly really fun video to make. I was not expecting to have this much to talk about here. I do have to warn you all that videos might get a bit shorter over these next few months since my semester just started up again, but hopefully you all will still enjoy the videos. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.